Here's an old record player, an old valve one. Don't recognise, made by Thompson, Diamond and Butcher Ltd. The amplifier and gramophone. It's typical wooden box. It's got a tone and volume. It's going to be valve. A bit rough condition, but inside it's got quite a nice Garrard 209 deck. So just take it apart, fix the valve amplifier which should be inside, clean it up, get the deck working okay, and it'll probably sound good for your old records. So I'll just take it apart, undid a few screws and a bit of pulling, and the whole deck and the surround is out, and the little cover plate, little plastic, was held in by 2 pins, just a little piece of wood, revealing the very, very basic amplifier. It's got a big selenium rectifier down there, that square thing, you can see it. 1 valve, capacitor, mains transformer, speaker transformer, and another capacitor there. Not much to it. It's about as basic as you can get with volume and tone. And it's got a little speaker, nice little Alnico, tiny little speaker in there. Well, I'll fix the amp. I'll clean up the inside of the auto mechanism, clean up the case the best I can. Just a few quick notes about the amplifier in this old record player. It's a single valve EL84. Well, this amp, virtually every component except the transformers were gone. I'll just show you quickly the circuit diagram. Very simple circuit, hardly any components at all. EL84 in class A with the transformer for the speaker on the anode, of course. Little power supply here. It had a selenium rectifier, half wave, supplying the power. It has 3 capacitors which were in this, all in this can here, 32, 16, 25. All of them completely, the capacitor's completely gone. There's no capacitance on any of them. So that had gone, that's come out. The 100 ohm was about 120 ohms. The 4K7 had drifted up, and it's got a volume and a tone. Just a quick few notes on the circuit. The pickup comes in here. It needs a high resistance to not load down that piezo or a ceramic type pickup. Feeds straight into the grid. The cathode has to have a resistor on it to develop the negative bias so that it'll work. 100 ohm is pretty typical. Put in a capacitor across it increases the sensitivity, a bit more gain. It's going to need a lot of gain because that's the only means of any gain, is just the 1 valve. Now this tone control across the output transformer, 0.05 and about 200k I measured resistor, a potentiometer. Now that is normally that is a fixed for cutting the high frequencies, stop ringing and protect the transformer at high frequencies, but by making a variable pot you get a tone control. I don't like doing that. That means you've got the full voltage you've got on this potentiometer. If the knob, if it shorts out or something, you wouldn't do it these days. It's dangerous if you don't have a knob on it and you're holding a metal shaft, you get a shock. Also, these pots can break down at that sort of voltage. I can see why they did it though. It's very simple. Now looking at these values, here we go. EL84, this is the original data sheet. 250 volts, 4.7k, which is that one. They've just followed the data sheet. It says here a little star on that. Decoupled by 8 microfarad capacitor. Well, they had a 25, bigger the better. Why do you need a capacitor on there? Well, when this is especially half-wave rectifier, single-ended, you've got a lot of pulsing on the HT, and that gets amplified, and you get a lot of hum, especially if you feed that into this grid, which is, this grid actually makes it more sensitive, and it helps accelerate the electrons and gives you a lot of gain. If you've got any ripple on there, you're going to amplify it and get a lot of hum. So you put a capacitor on there and to keep that absolute minimum. So that's how the 3 capacitors, the main smoothing capacitor and the others. So the circuit, pretty straightforward. Everything was gone, especially this capacitor was gone. That was these old black Hunts ones. They're hopeless. They just don't last. And the 2 resistors, the capacitor was gone. By the way, these little, luckily these weren't lost. These are from the knobs. They always come unstuck. They normally get lost. Well, luckily they're not. I just used some Evo Stick Instant and stick them back in. By the way, there was also no earth. Typical old equipment is just no earth. So I've changed the cable and fixed the earth to the chassis, and that there's also an earth wire that goes off to the deck, which I've disconnected at the moment. Weirdly, that earth wire to the deck was connected to the same earth wire used on the pickup. So and I don't know how they got away with no hum. So there's the original circuit. As I had to take it all apart and replace the components, I decided to do some upgrades to it. Now, half-wave rectification is not good on a mains transformer. It means you've got pulsing only one way all the time on the transformer, which gives you a magnetization, DC magnetization one way, which will slowly build up, and then this will start saturating at high power, and then it'll get hot, and it's just not a good idea. Normally you want the current to flow one way, then the other way to cancel out any permanent magnetization. So you need a full wave rectifier. Also, the heater on old equipment, they always connected one side of the heater to the chassis and run the heater off over. That can give you some hum in the chassis rail, which can get picked up, especially in a Class A, which is very sensitive to any noise. So I did a few mods. I disconnected the heater from the earth and run 2 wires to the valve. You can also put a couple of little resistors in, which reduces the noise hum even more by you put 1 off each leg and connect the middle to earth. So that hopefully will reduce any heater hum. Full wave rectification, you can buy a little rectifier for next to nothing, but I had some diodes, just make sure they're the right voltage. They're so cheap. You need to connect 4 of them like that across the high voltage winding, and then you got full wave rectification, give you a little more power, and move the hum up from 50 to 100 Hertz, and 100 Hertz is easier to filter out than 50 Hertz. I put a whopping great big capacitor in there because they're cheap and I had one. Another capacitor in there, changed the 4K7, 100 ohm, a nice capacitor across that as well. Didn't need to change these controls, but on the transformer I'm not going to leave that pot connected across the high voltage. I moved the 0.05, which is up there, off of the rail. Now of course the power supply rail and the earth are both very low impedance points for signal, i.e. if any signal just disappears, it gets absorbed like like pouring water into a lake or something, it just disappears. So you don't need to connect this to the supply rail, it can be connected to earth. It's just a 0 point for the signal. So what I did is, instead of connecting this across there, I just connected it down to earth. This way the voltage is kept off the pot and it didn't add any more components. Right, I've done some mods on this record player to get it to be able to use a lower sensitivity pickup, as I couldn't get an original one that was in there, which was a very high output old ceramic or piezo pickup, which came with this arm originally. It was one that had a little turnover on the front and would have had a very high output voltage, but maybe 1.5 volts or higher, which was enough to drive the EL84. But that was not in it, and you can't really get them anymore that work. And to put another ceramic pickup in there, which will only give a couple of 100 millivolts out, I tried one, and you had to put the volume on maximum and it still wasn't loud enough. So wondering what to do. There's the circuit down there. It's got one valve, which was an EL84. Anyway, let me see what I've done on the circuit here. So here's the original circuit, very simple. An EL84 was driven by a pickup with a very high output, which was sufficient to drive this EL84 to give some volume. Pretty simple circuit. Had this tone control across the output transformer and a single half-wave rectifier. All those components were gone, as I said earlier, and I've changed them. So I changed it to this circuit. I put a bridge rectifier in. I changed the tone control so it wasn't at high voltage and connected to earth. Everything else about the same, put new components in. But it didn't give enough volume with a decent pickup like a BSR SC12M, which normally sound nice in these decks. So I wonder what to do. Well, the EL84 is the same. There's another valve, the ECL86, which is used in a lot of record players later on, which is actually a pentode and a triode. Now the pentode is like an EL84, basically the same spec, but it's got a triode built in the case as well, and it's the same size, height as an EL84, and it uses 9 pins. But I thought, well, I'll put one of them in and then I'll amplify the signal. So I had a look at the circuit, and I had a look at the pinouts. Here I've drawn the valve out so you can see the pins, and how to connect the various resistors and a few extra capacitors to it. So it's just a bit of a fiddle. I took this out and just rewired some of the components on the board to different positions. Had to cut a few tracks and move put a few resistors here and there. Not big deal. So I'll show you the circuit. So now we've got a high gain circuit here. You've got a bridge rectifier, as I said. I've now been able to put a little square bridge rectifier. I've screwed it onto the chassis. I'd already done the heaters. Now the heaters are the same, so they didn't have to change. They go to the common pins 4 and 5. The valve. Now I've got the specification of the ECL86, and it says for the pentode section here, it says you should use it talks about 170 ohms cathode resistor at 250 volts, and driven hard will give you 4 watts output with an input of 3.2 volts. So no wonder it couldn't drive that when we've only got a couple of 100 millivolts. And then you've got the triode section. So I changed the resistor. It had 100 ohm on that EL84 to try and get the max gain. I put a 150 ohm in, and we're aiming now to get up to 4 watts at 10% distortion. Looking at the rest of the spec, on the triode section here, with an anode load of 220k, it's and the VB voltage, which we are up about 250, with a cathode resistor of 2.6k, you should get a gain of V out to be in about 66, which is good. That'll really amplify our signal up nicely. We don't need to get any higher gain. 66 is going to be enough. So using those figures, I did the circuit here. Let's just point out a few things. I changed that to 150 ohms, bypassing capacitor. That's the pentode section. There's the same tone. Now this is the extra bit, the triode. 2K7, I've used a 250K anode. I've put a little extra smooth into the triode, try and reduce the hum. There's only 2 components, so I just put them in. I could have run that directly off the B plus and they've left these out, but I put it in anyway. Don't need to do nothing on the input, straight off the bar, the grid. The 2K7 down here, and then just need a capacitor to block the high voltage down to here, a 1 meg leak. So it's all pretty straightforward. So working it out, you've got gain of 66 here. So the pentode requires 3.2 volts to give you 4 watts at 10% distortion. So the triode input needs 3.2 divided by 66, comes out to approximately 50 millivolts to give you the maximum output at full volume. Now I'm planning on using a BSR SC11M cartridge, which I've got, and this is the specification that I could find. It says 77 millivolts output voltage, so that's just about perfect for our 50 millivolts. Just do a final sound check before I screw it all together. Put the BSR SC11M cartridge in. I don't know if you can see it. It's an LP and 78. Let's try it with this single, an old Beatles Strawberry Fields Forever, 45 RPM, and just check that the volume is going to be high enough. So let's just start it up. I've got the volume up quite high. Turn the volume down and control cuts the treble off, or you can put the treble on. It's getting hard to be. After making this circuit modification, it was good, but it had too much gain. It was distorting the little speaker too much, so I thought, well, I might as well use that gain and provide some feedback which will actually improve the sound quality. So here's a further mod from that circuit, just evolved. What I did is put a feedback off the speaker round here onto the cathode of this triode. So you have a 100 ohm here, and this is a potential divider which takes the high voltage off the speaker, signal, and you divide it down 1k over 100 ohms, so it takes it down by 10. I messed around with this value. I had a pot in here until I got the sound, so just on maximum volume it sounded just didn't distort. I put a scope on it and a meter and everything, but I won't show you all that. And so 1k, a lot of feedback, which is good. There's a lot of gain here now, bypass that 2k7 with a capacitor. And because I decided to move the volume control. Originally the volume control on ceramic pickup, those old players, they put the volume control right up at the front and just vary the voltage off of the pickup. Well, I thought, well, the better technique is to boost the signal up to maximum and then cut it down, rather than work on low level signals by cutting it down on the pot, which can pick up noise and that. So I take the volume control off the input and put a 1 meg grid leak on there. 1 meg's nice for the pickup load, and move the volume to more conventional position. So you've got maximum signal here, pass it through the capacitor, and put it into the volume control, which got a high, nice big signal, which you can just cut it down. It reduces any noise as well at the same time. You can connect this direct to the capacitor. It's not a good idea, because if you put that on full, and I've got moved the tone control as well, it can cause some instability if you put them all on max. So normally you put a resistor in here just to stop it going to maximum off of that capacitor. I put a 47k in there, and I've moved the tone control off of the output transformer, which is a bit unusual, and I've just moved it down to a normal position where it's just a treble cut on the signal by a capacitor and resistor. It doesn't give a huge range, but it just takes the treble off if the record is too trebly. That's what that did as well. All it did was cut all the treble. So, and then the rest of the circuit the same, the pentode section, and now it sounds a lot better because you've got all this gain and a lot of feedback through that small speaker. So here's the amp. It's turned on. You can't. It's in there. I've just got the deck lifted up on some. Just up a bit, and I've got a 78 on actually. It sounds a Lonnie Donegan, and I'll just play it. Just a bit of it. It's on maximum volume at the moment, so it's going to be quite loud. Starts off quietly.
I wake up early in the morning, hear the ding-dong ring.
You've got a treble cut.
Walking to the table,
Takes the treble off.
Same damn thing, knife and fork around the table.
And the volume is on max. I can turn the volume down.
I complain about it.
Turn it right down. That's easy, loud enough. That's loud enough for this little record player and speaker. So it's about the maximum I can get out of it. This record player didn't have a light or anything telling you that it's on, and the background noise is pretty low now, so when it's on you can easily leave it switched on if you're not careful. I did contemplate drilling a hole and putting a light in it, but I decided not to in the end. So it's about as far as I can go with the mods. It started off very simple circuit, single diode, few capacitors, and I evolved it down to this, changing the valve and changing the components around the valve. Kept the same transformers, same speaker, same volume and tone control, and just messed around with the wiring and added some resistors and the odd capacitor, because I had to replace all the parts anyway because they were all worn out, all the capacitors and the resistors. So there you go. I think that's just finished now. Here's the deck all back together again, all screwed in and all together. I've just set the tracking weights to about 3.6 grams with the SC11M cartridge. I'll just put on a record and play a little bit. Got this old LP here. I said 33. This has got the LP and 78 stylus, so make sure it's the right way round. Just start it up. It's best to lower the lid for maximum bass, but let's just start it first. It's an old record.
If you need somebody to love, just look into my eyes.
Then you've got the tone. You can take the top off.
If you're feeling sorry and sad,
Seems to be best when it's bright though. Good range for an album. Just take that off, and I've got a 78 which I can put on as well. A 78. My Feet Hit the Ground by Cliff Richards. Set it to 78. Obviously, flip over the cartridge to 78 position. Start it up because it goes much quicker being a 78.
You really got me reeling the top. High class feeling when I see you rather shining. I'm on a silver lining. I can't be no denying. I feel just like I'm flying away and you're not around. My feet at the ground. My feet at the ground.
Don't want to play too much in case YouTube mess it up, but
Will you smile?
it's pretty good for playing your old 78s. Let's turn that down a bit and reject that one. So it's about the best I can get it. It's cleaned up okay. There's lots of little marks all over it, but the deck's cleaned up nice and white. Just lock the arm in position. Remember, it's got the 78 on it, and that's the best I can do. Carry handle's still good. The clips still work good on the side. And of course the on-off switch still works. Turn it off.